point of no return. They say that before the first map was ever drawn, there was a king who grew tired of his own kingdom. He'd seen every sunset, tasted every wine, and conquered every enemy. He was bored. So he offered a chest of emeralds to any man who could show him something that wasn't meant for mortal eyes. A silent traveler led him deep into the jungle, to a door made of nothing but shadow and starlight. The traveler told the king, "Step through, and you shall see the beginning and the end of all things. But know this, the price of seeing everything is that you can never see home again." The king laughed. He thought his crown made him heavier than fate. He stepped through, and the door vanished before his shadow could even clear the threshold. Some folks never learned that forbidden isn't a challenge. It's a warning. Arthur and Claire were deep in the sub-Saharan bush, bouncing in the back of a rusted Land Rover. They had a guide named Malik, who barely spoke, his eyes constantly scanning the tall grass. For Arthur, the humidity was a physical weight, but for Claire, it was an accessory. She checked her reflection in her darkened phone screen, complaining about the lack of a signal. She wanted the authentic experience, but she wanted to be able to upload it too. Then the engine died. Sudden, violent silence swallowed the jungle. Suddenly, 4 men emerged from the brush, like they'd been grown from the dirt itself, rifles raised, hard eyes. Malik didn't even put up a fight. He just knelt in the dust. Before Arthur could draw a breath to negotiate, he was yanked from the vehicle. He was pushed into the red dust of the camp, his hands biting into plastic zip ties that felt like they were cutting through to the bone. He watched in a paralyzed, hollow terror as 3 of the men dragged Claire toward a dark, windowless shack at the edge of the clearing. He heard her scream, a sound so jagged it felt like it was cutting his own throat. He closed his eyes and prayed for a bullet, just so he wouldn't have to hear the silence that follows a scream like that. But the bullet didn't come. Instead, he heard a giggle. The door to the shack swung open. Claire stepped out, wiping fake tears from her cheeks, her face splitting into a jagged, manic grin. Behind her, the rebels were already pocketing the thick rolls of American hundreds she'd handed over. "Arthur, you should have seen your face," she shrieked, doubled over in laughter. "You looked like a ghost. I told you this trip would be transformative." Arthur didn't move. He didn't even blink. The terror was still there, but it had calcified. It had turned into a cold, heavy anchor in the pit of his stomach. He looked at his wife, this woman who had spent $50,000 to watch him crumble, and he realized he didn't know her at all. "Let's go," he said, his voice a flat, dead thing. "Oh, don't be a bore, Artie," she mocked, already checking her satellite phone. "The fixer says the real prize is only 4 miles deeper. The Temple of the Third Sky. No tourists, no cameras, just us and the void." They pushed through the emerald choke of the jungle for hours. The air grew heavy. The birds went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. They found the ruin at sunset. It wasn't a building, it was a scar in the earth. A stone archway stood alone in a clearing draped in vines that bled a faint, bioluminescent green. Inside the arch, there was no jungle. There was only a swirling, vertical sea of emerald light, a doorway to a place that shouldn't exist. "This is it," Claire whispered, her greed finally silencing her laughter. "The ultimate unfollowed experience. No one has seen this, Arthur. No one." She didn't wait. She grabbed his arm, the same arm that had been shaking in the dirt just hours before, and pulled him toward the glow. "Last one in is a coward," she hissed. They stepped through. The world didn't just change, it vanished. The humidity was replaced by a sterile, freezing vacuum. When Arthur's vision cleared, he wasn't in Africa anymore. He was standing on a bridge of obsidian glass that stretched into an infinite violet nebula. Above them, stars that looked like screaming eyes pulsed in time with his own heartbeat. Claire turned back, her mouth hanging open to scream. But there was no archway. There was no jungle, just the endless, swirling green of the portal, hanging in the void like a closed eye. "Arthur?" she gasped, her voice thin and high, stripped of its arrogance. "Where's the door? Tell them to open the door. How much do they want? I'll pay double." Arthur looked at her. He looked at her designer boots on the obsidian glass and her trembling, expensive hands. He remembered the sound of her laughing at his fear in the dirt. "There aren't any rebels here, Claire," Arthur said, his voice finally finding its strength. "There's no one to bribe. There's no one to play a joke on. You wanted a place where no one could follow us." He let go of her hand. "Well, here we are." As the dimensions began to stretch, pulling them light years apart in a matter of seconds, the last thing Arthur heard wasn't a scream. It was the silence. The absolute, deafening silence of a woman who finally realized that some things can't be bought and some doors only swing one way. Money can get you a lot of things: a fast car, a big house, a fake kidnapping for a laugh. But it can't buy back a moment once it's gone. And it sure as hell can't buy a handle for a door that's already shut. Watch your step out there. Some adventures don't have an exit strategy. Good night.